Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel, presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
Great, thank you for the warm introduction, everyone, and thank you, Sean, off camera, for welcoming us all here today. Suzanne, it's so great to have you on the podcast. We've done a few of these live events, so we're just going to take everything as it comes, but just really happy to have you here on the podcast today. Yeah, we're really excited about it. Mike's excited too.
Of course I am.
So typically when we do these podcasts, a bio is provided, like your biography ahead of time, and then we slice and dice it and put it into something very concise. But I didn't want to do that in this case because I think it's important for everyone in the audience to just understand where you've come from and what your accomplishments have been. So I'm going to take some time to introduce the audience to who you are, and then we're going to get to some questions that will hopefully delve a bit deeper and share sort of your journey so far and where you're going. So obviously, Suzanne Balima, she's with Research and Innovation at Vale Base Metals. She leads the open innovation activities for Pyrrhotite resource opportunities at Vale Base Metals, where she drives transformative open innovation initiatives forward for VBM. Actually, VBM's I haven't considered that. Is that what we're saying now, or can we say Vale Base Metals?
That's the cool brand.
VBM.
The cool kids call
God,
it VBM.
it's a tech firm. VBM. With a keen focus on fostering a culture of cross-functional collaboration, she applies state-of-the-art innovation methodologies to address innovation challenges with a holistic yet creative approach and cultivates an intentionally diverse ecosystem to unearth, pardon the pun, groundbreaking, pardon the pun, solution concepts. Drawing from a multifaceted background spanning industries including insurance, banking, healthcare, consumer goods, and manufacturing, Suzanne is uniquely positioned to navigate the intricate landscape of innovation across diverse sectors and technologies. She leverages her collaborative spirit to push boundaries and create solutions that shape the future of business and technology. Suzanne holds a Bachelor of Applied Science in Biomedical Mechanical Engineering from the University of Ottawa. She's a GG. And she's a GG. And she completed a Master's in Design and Innovation Strategy from the Institute Europeo di Design. And I don't know what their mascot is, but you're also one of them.
I don't believe we have a mascot.
Oh, no mascot?
It's a very North American thing, I guess.
Yeah, maybe. Mascot TBD. And again, we welcome Suzanne on the podcast, so thanks again for joining us. So when we start these things out, the name of the show obviously is the Unlikely Innovators, and we like to sort of sketch, how the heck did this person get to where they are? But I think I want to ask it sort of this way. When people think about careers in mining or mining, they think about engineering disciplines, and in particular, they think about someone who might be a mining engineer or a metallurgist. But I think that's not always the case. And I think especially, drawing from the background that I just mentioned to everyone, during your studies of biomedical mechanical engineering, did you ever think you'd end up in mining? Did that ever cross your mind when you were taking those courses?
Never, to be frank. Mining actually happened a little bit by accident, actually. But maybe to take you through the journey, since I guess you want to hear a little bit more about that. Initially, I guess way back in high school, not to age myself, my drive was to pursue a career that would help me improve people's lives. And so I want to say naturally, maybe not, but naturally to me it became, I want to be a doctor, I want to go into medicine. Until I realized I would have to dissect dead bodies. I was like, that's a big no-no, not going to happen. And so the pivot there was, well, biomedical engineering allows me to kind of be still in the healthcare space, take care of health, but in a more distant way and also in a more scalable way, because you're creating products that can be used by more than one person at a time. At that point, anyways, sparing you some of the details, but my career has taken me to research, has taken me to, as you said, manufacturing, all in the biomedical space, the HVAC. So maybe people don't think about it, but the HVAC is heating, ventilation, air conditioning. So the systems you have for hospitals are slightly different, let's say, than the units you would have in traditional buildings because of, surgical and all the germs and different standards. And throughout all of that, I just, as I was thinking back now being in mining, a lot of what we design in biomedical engineering are things like implants. things like devices you use in hospitals, and a lot of those use metals. But you only look at metals from the mechanical property angle. So yes, I was somehow connected to mining, but I never really looked at it from that lens. And it's only now that I think about, well, when you are designing something with metals, as an engineer, you do need to consider cost. And cost is directly related to, can we actually mine this? And can we mine this at a price that makes sense, right? Because if the cost of your iron is way too high, you probably wouldn't use iron or steel anymore. So that was kind of an interesting little, reflection now that I'm here. And sadly, it's also something that the programs in general, whether that was biomedical or mechanical, didn't really emphasize on, right? It's just the material and that's it, but you don't really think about the industry behind it. Fast forward now, I think about how being in the mining industry, I still get to fulfill, I guess, my personal career mission around transforming lives by enabling other industries to do what they need to do. So I'm enabling the medical sector still by enabling, through innovation, a good price of all the metals that they would need for the different applications. Same with manufacturing. All of us probably, well, maybe not all, but most of us would use a car, a vehicle, something that definitely has metal. So that it's just been an interesting kind of shift of perspective, being from the biomedical side to the mining side. And the other thing is, I grew up, so my teenage years, so pre-deciding what I wanted to do, were in South Africa, which is also a fairly big, mining is pretty big there. But all the people I met at the time of, deciding what I wanted to do with my career were, as you said, geology people, geologists, and mining engineers. And so it also kind of narrowed down what I thought the industry was about. And so if I didn't like earth sciences, I guess that was just not the industry for me. And again, fast forward to today, meeting all these different people in the mining sector with different career paths, it's just eye-opening to see that sometimes if you're exposed to just the mining engineers and just the geologists, maybe that's the narrow view you get of mining, whereas it's a lot broader than that.
Yeah, I think there's so many more possibilities, especially now, right? Like we look at Cambrian College and we have 90 plus programs, but I think there's only one that has mining in the title, but a lot of the students that graduate from the engineering tech side and skilled trades, they go into mining as well. And I mean, I think even when we think beyond some of the program offerings we have here when it comes to new technologies that are coming into play in computer science, like there's all sorts of new ways that we could think about, very meaningful and contributing careers in mining that, 5-10 years ago wouldn't have you would have thought that would have been a fit for you, right? So.
Yeah. And the other thing is, because I do like to be in the student communities a lot, and I also realized that mining, for some reason, has a different, it's almost as if people don't think about it as a company first and foremost. So just like any company, you need HR professionals, you need finance professionals, you need, communication professionals, PR, environment. But people only think, again, of geology and mining. And there's all the other stuff that still needs to have, services and people to drive those aspects of the industry as well.
Absolutely. Obviously you work in innovation, and Steve and I also work in innovation in the work that we do here. So he's nodding his head. That's good. It's not a surprise. So innovation is a word that comes up a lot in our line of work, but it also does come up a lot, even outside of our respective circles. And I hesitate to say that innovation has become a buzzword, but in many respects it has. It seems it can be overused and overplayed if we don't actually understand what we mean by that word and just being used as a substitute for something new. But maybe I wanted to ask you, because you're an expert in this area, what does innovation mean to you, and how do you apply it, to the work that you do now at VBM?
Sure. So innovation to me, that's my own definition, but I guess through my different experiences, I landed on its creativity for purpose and impact. And I'll unpack that a little bit. Feel free to jump in. But the creativity part is typically you innovate because you want to do something differently. So if you're using the same methods that you've always used, you're just going to repeat the same thing. So how do you break out of that? You need to have a creative approach of some sort to get there. The purpose part is because, again, you innovate for a purpose. If you're innovating to improve your efficiency, it's very different from innovating to rethink your future, right? And that variety and that broad spectrum of what you could do with innovation is just, it's infinite, I want to say, but there are, if you look at innovation as a discipline, it also has specific tools for those different purposes. And I think what's happening with the buzzword aspect right now is that because it's creative means oftentimes there's no right or wrong, right? You can be creative in whatever way, and that's okay. But I think once you add in the purpose side, you're trying to use creativity in a way that's measurable and in a way that will actually drive results. And then the impact part comes in because innovation without people adopting whatever the innovation is just, a fun activity, an experiment. It's leisure, if I could say. And so that aspect of adoption, which, at a broader scale is actually commercial, I have a hard time with that word, but commercialization is the three components, I would say. And I think part of the reason why it's a buzzword is that anyone is creative. I fundamentally believe that every single one of us is creative. And so if you can be creative, then you can be innovative. But if you're forgetting about those other aspects, am I using the right tool for the right purpose? Am I even thinking about the purpose? And am I trying to actually have people adopt whatever it is that I'm coming up with? Then you're not really innovating, you're just being creative.
Yeah, and I should just say the full name of the title of the podcast is The Unlikely Innovators for Purpose and Impacts, but but for space requirements, we dumbed it down to just The Unlikely Innovators. No, of course. There's a lot to unpack within innovation, and one of the things that I think about when I think about innovation, because I've been around the space a little bit, is if you had asked me 20 years ago or 25 years ago, when I was one or 2 years old, of course, just responding to that gray hair comment from the peanut gallery earlier. If you were to ask me a while ago, is finance an innovative industry, I would say no. But now I think through largely efforts of folks like you, fintech has become a thing. And I think it would be interesting to me if you would draw a contrast of what it's like, because you've worked in finance and you've worked now in mining and a number of other sectors. Can you draw some sort of similarities and differences between what it's like to adopt innovation in those, or to instill innovation in those different sectors? Because it might seem easier when you're dealing with debits and credits in finance versus, pulling rocks out of the ground, so to speak. So take that however you want to.
Sure, yeah. Maybe to start off with an equal footing, I think the methods and the tools are the same fundamentally. If you're curious about the tools, I'm happy to share, but one of them that I apply mostly in everything is design thinking. And part of that is, maybe I'll speak to three components of it. One is how you frame a problem. So if you're trying to come up with a different set of solutions, you need to frame the problem differently. Whether that's in finance or insurance or retail or mining, that's really the same. The second part of that could be ideation. So if you're coming up with ideas, the way you come up with new ideas is fundamentally, there's a set of tools, methods, practices. You can apply them in mining or finance or any industry. So that's pretty standard. And then the collaboration aspect. So being able to bring people together, discuss, share ideas, build on each other's ideas, that's again fundamentally the same. What I think perhaps was different, to now contrast a little bit, is in the financial world, it's more consumer facing. So you do have access to more people to ideate, more availability. People are in offices typically or remote, so booking a meeting is not that hard. But if you're innovating for mining, our real user that creates value, I would say, is the person in operations. And they're busy with production, right? So to get that person out can be a little bit of a challenge. Or for you to go to that site as well, right? You're very aware of all the safety that needs to happen, et cetera. So it's not as easy to have people come together and collaborate and ideate as it was in, I would say, the financial services side. Another one is, and maybe that's also a little bit the nature of my work in the financial space, it was more creating new products and solutions from scratch. So we came up with the concept, we developed the concept, We built it and it was all digital. So again, coming up with a digital solution is a little bit easier and faster than coming up with solutions that, if you've heard, for instance, of the Vale mechanical rock excavator, it's a huge piece of hardware. It's going to cut rock. So where do you even get, a face to try? So the logistics that come around all of, mining, I would say, are a little bit tougher. And obviously, once you add in the aspect of safety, not to say there's no cybersecurity issues in finance, right? But it's a whole different ballgame that makes it a little bit more challenging. Another one, and maybe related, is because I worked more with digital tools in finance, it was also a lot easier to get access to a sandbox environment. Sandbox environment is almost like a test place, so you're not impacting anything, right? You're just creating something there, testing it, doing whatever you want. If it breaks, there's no impact. In mining, that's also a little bit tougher to get. So maybe a little bit easier if you're doing any applications that are digital, but even then, there's always usually an impact on operations in mining. So it's a little bit harder to create that simulation environment to test in the mining sector. I would say those are maybe some of the top that come to mind. Another one, maybe on the aspect of creativity, is to innovate, and maybe we're speaking the same language here, but you need to have a certain kind of environment, right? You need to bring people to that creative space to come up with, break the status quo, think differently.
Coffee.
There you go. Coffee, paint on the walls, and that can be a little bit more challenging in mining. I don't know if it's a cultural thing, it's just an observation, but I do find that in the financial sector, it was a little bit easier for people to just, start dreaming and creating versus mining, where it's typically, I think, because of the mindset of, safety and compliance and regulation, it's just a different mindset. So to get people to that mental space is a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, and I think your points about being able to go from different sectors, I think makes a lot of sense, because I think at the core they are fundamentally the same. Whatever approach you take to innovation, regardless of what activities or what sectoral focus you may be in, whether it's finance or healthcare or mining, you're applying that thought process. And again, I think the same environments, because I think of our team, and a lot of the work that we do is primarily focused on mining and heavy industry, making prototypes or doing process improvements. And we recently had a project with Health Sciences North, and it was to design and print a rib cage. And we thought, this is a health sciences project. We don't really have anybody on the team with a health sciences background, but again, you could take those same concepts that we apply design thinking from any other mechanical engineering project. We had Austin, great mechanical or mechatronics student on that project, going from designing, other things that we would typically, be doing for mining companies like Vale, to then now he's on how to find the most anatomically correct rib cage, print that, ensuring that the print makes sense. So anyway, I don't want to give Austin too much. His head's gonna explode out of that cap. But
also,
all that to say, I agree.
One of those projects is a lot grosser than the other. I think the rib cage is pretty gross.
Yeah, but again, not a real dead body. So
yeah,
it's,
going back, you would love it because it's not a real dead body, but
synthetic. Awesome. But again, that was a really long tangent. In my mind, it was going to be much more quick and concise. But thank you for going on that ride with me, because I think I meant well.
You got there. You landed.
I got there. At Austin's expense, of course. But but we do have a lot of students in the audience today, which is great. Thank you for coming. And so we knew that this would likely be the case. So one of the things that we did want to ask you was just about some of the different roles that you've had at Vale, because I think even for Steve and I, seasoned pros in this space, some of your early job titles at Vale were kind of like, wow, that's a really interesting title. And I think for students to think about opportunities down the road and all sorts of other roles that they may not even have had on their radar, I did want to ask you about, when you started at Vale, one of your early titles was corporate entrepreneur and innovation designer. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about that and what that entails? I know that it ties into...
I wanted to be that when I grew up, for sure.
Yeah, that's something where when I was going through high school and I went to the guidance counselor, they're like, what do you want to be? And it's like, you like history? Like, you can only be a teacher and a librarian. It's like, and look at me now, guidance counselor. But anyway, I'll put it back to you to talk about that role and maybe a little bit more about how what you did and how you found yourself in that.
Sure. So corporate entrepreneur is really being an entrepreneur inside the company. So you don't really have the same difficulties, I would say, as an entrepreneur outside. So we're not fighting, well, we are fighting for funds, but it's different. So the idea there is, again, we're innovating and there's a strategic angle to how we're innovating. And so can you bring in entrepreneurs, which are typically people that will go hard at a problem and really try and understand it and really fight to find a solution for it? So the way we were essentially organized was that each, let's say, group of people were given a tough problem to solve, so something that the current processes were not able to figure out, or a problem that's just been around and churning and churning. And so how do you look at that from the perspective of an entrepreneur? Entrepreneurs would, understand what your market is, really dissect the problem, pitch to get funding. So that was kind of the structure of how we would go about the problem. It's, you're given this, go explore, go find people internally within the company. But there was also the lens of, what if this ends up being a solution that is for the bigger mining industry or even beyond, right? So what does that market look like? And then, go through the rounds of pitching to get funds, because again, it's still the same pool of money, even though it's corporate funds that are allocated to different problems. So you did still have to fight a little bit for, the chunk of money that you needed. And after that, it's also looking at, if you think about entrepreneurs, they need to stretch their dollars. Not everyone has, the money flowing in to do what they need to do. And so the same principle kind of applied, where when you're an entrepreneur trying to stretch your dollars, you go to incubators, accelerators, and you kind of share resources at that point. And so for us, the angle there was to look at an ecosystem approach. We don't know everything about all the problems. We're not necessarily, business builders the same way a startup would be. And so how do we then leverage the ecosystem within innovation, the innovation ecosystem, to support us so that whatever skills we don't have, we're able to kind of collaborate with someone else or other people at times to come up with a solution and also develop the solution. We typically don't develop from scratch, I would say. So having a starting point typically means you find a partner that you want to have a longer term relationship with and build upon that. And for the innovation designer piece, it's really about the process of innovation. And that's, again, something that I would say is still not super understood, but there is a process to innovation. If you're trying to scale something, like a creative process, if you think of any creative, I don't know if we have any creative people from creative programs.
I should hope so.
I hope so too. But there is a creative process. If you want something that's repeatable and scalable, you need to have a process. And so innovation designer is about understanding the different tools that can be applied in innovation, but also then pulling in the right tools across the process to enable the innovation that you're trying to drive.
And I think that in many ways, I was going to say that's a good segue, but we came up with the question, so that'd be a bit self-laudatory. But I think there's been a somewhat recent trend around the concept of open innovation. You could see how that position led to the need to create something formal that formalizes partnerships between those SMEs and startups with really good ideas and the challenges that a mining company the size of Vale Base Metals would have, and a means of eliminating some of the friction between how does a company that size work with SMEs that have the solutions. So I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the Vale Base Metals Global Open Innovation Challenge, and maybe we could talk about the Innovation Challenge broadly and what that approach is like. And then I also want you to talk about Pyrrhotite resource recovery, which is what's open right now for the listeners, so that they can understand what opportunities are available to them.
Sure, happy to share more. So in terms of open innovation in general, it's broad, right? You're opening it up to anybody. So we collaborate with startups, with OEMs, with educational institutions. Haven't seen government, but in some initiatives that we've worked on in Brazil, the government also gets involved. So it's really the idea of being humble, which can be strange for a corporate environment, but being humble enough to understand that you're not able to solve all your problems by yourself, And the world is becoming more and more complex. So you do need to have different brains that you're tapping into with people with different perspectives, understanding, areas of expertise that you can, share, again, your knowledge and resources to come up with something that is more sustainable, more long-term, and that actually solves the problem. So it's not a patch fix, but like actually a proper fix. And in terms of the Pyrrhotite innovation that we have right now, so there are two aspects of the reframing. So that Open Innovation Challenge came to really support our circularity. So the sustainability agenda around circularity, it's meant to really help push that forward. So we are currently still in early stages, so I can speak to some of what we've done so far, but a part of it is reframing. So pyrrhotite tailings are the waste product of mining operations. And so when you look at pyrrhotite, first of all, what we've seen as 100 plus years of legacy mining here in Sudbury alone is how do we look at this waste as a resource and how do we extract maximum value from that waste? So that's step number one. But the other aspect of it is that pyrrhotite, if you look at the chemical composition, has a lot of sulfur and a lot of iron and some nickel. And I say that because we are primarily a nickel mining company. And so for us to shift our thinking from let's just focus on the nickel to let's look at sulfur actually, and let's look at iron, because those are things we haven't traditionally considered. But those are also things that we're not necessarily experts in, right? And that's where, again, open innovation comes in. It's being able to recognize that if we find a partner, we can collaborate. If you're the sulfur expert and you're the iron expert, let's do it together, because you'll have knowledge I don't have as a nickel. I'm not a nickel expert. Let's assume
I am an iron expert, so thank you for bringing that up.
Perfect. Come on board. So it's really about recognizing that, throughout the ecosystem, different people have different knowledge, experiences, capabilities, tools, skills, and it's really about how do we come together so that everyone's gaining something, a win-win relationship, and that we're also solving the problem at the end of the day, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be more sustainable. We're trying to, leave the planet greener, extract resources, and we can do it in a better way. Then that's value for everybody, including the communities.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you don't, over the last 10 years, you don't see companies doing these kinds of things. But this is obviously something that's going to be core to the sort of approach when it comes to innovation in Vale Base Metals going forward. Is that sort of how you see it? That this is, so what you're doing with Pyrrhotite can be reused as a model for other big challenges?
Definitely, yeah. I would say each challenge was a little bit different. So again, going back to the toolkit and the methods. Right. So yeah, overarching, the method is definitely something we can replicate. But I think depending on the problem you're trying to solve, the parts of the ecosystem may look a little bit different, and that can change how you look at it and how you engage with the ecosystem and how you enable the process as well, because you will need access to different people.
And actually, speaking of different people, one of the things that we wanted to ask you about is that the research has shown that innovation thrives in diverse environments, right? We talked earlier about how the environment is important, but the people are important. I think if I built a team of people that had the same lived experience as me, same educational background as me, we're not going to get a whole lot of innovation done, right? Because we're going to be thinking the same things, not necessarily bringing different perspectives to the table. And so I was wondering if maybe you can talk a little bit about how, if a company is trying to, or even an organization for that matter, if it's in community-based organizations, if they're trying to grow their innovation culture or really kind of grab onto that, how important is it for them to have diversity at the forefront when building that team, to ensure that you have different people around the table, to ensure that you're actually having these spark of ideas that actually are the things that turn into that innovation that they're looking for?
Mm-hmm. Definitely fundamental, in my opinion. Like you said, if you have the same people solving a problem, they're going to come up with the same solutions. They have the same tools. They have the same way of looking at the world. But then throw in there, and maybe that's a dumb example, but if you're with a child and with all the knowledge and experience and maybe constraints we've developed over time, and a child asks you a question that you're just like, wait, what? And so unless you have people that have a diversity of experiences to ask those questions and kind of interject in ways you hadn't thought of before, I think it's going to be very challenging to come up with really novel innovations. And so for me, diversity at the core is important, but it's also important to have the right environment for diversity, right? If we're all, 3 diverse people sitting together, or maybe 2 people that are, in the same echo chamber type of mindset, and then you have this one person who thinks differently, and every time they suggest something, they're shut down.
Yeah.
That's also difficult. So I think there's more that comes to just having people that think differently, but it's how do you enable those people to actually share what they have, ask the questions that they want to ask. And in mining, a lot of people have grown into, started off as a junior, have been around 30 plus years. And another contrast I'm seeing is having been exposed to industries where maybe people are more in and out, or they come check it out and they leave. There's a bit more flexibility around, oh, this is a new concept, let's see what we do with it, versus mining where maybe you're more pushed to follow the masses because you're just the sprinkle in there that needs to understand why we do things a certain way. So having that right environment, I would say, is also pretty crucial. And again, for the different things I've mentioned in the past, if you want to reframe, you're not going to look at a problem differently if everybody's looking at it the same way. If you want to ideate and you have, the same ideas being thrown by everyone, you need to have that diversity so you can kind of mix and match and come up with something else. So fostering diversity, not just having diverse people, is pretty important.
Yeah, and that was, perhaps this is a blind spot for me, but that age diversity, like age and experience diversity, is something I think that we don't think about too much, but so critical to a legacy industry like mining, right? Because you can have folks that are there for 30 plus years, and then you have, how many people tried mining and left because, there wasn't that sort of environment to innovate. So I think it's important that, and it's great that Vale Base Metals is doing that through some of the initiatives. We have some young people in the audience. There's some students here, and I want to just go back to what we talked about at the very top, and that is mining engineering, geology. Those are some of the words we use when we think about careers in mining. But if you can, you've worked with radical new things like AI and machine learning and a whole host of other groups of technologies. What would your advice be to students that are looking to kick the tires on mining, and how would they see themselves in mining, from their sort of diverse interests? Is there a role for everyone in mining? I would be inclined to say yes, but I'd love to know what you have to say.
Yeah, I definitely think so now that I've been exposed to the industry. I would say one thing is definitely to attend as much as you can student events around mining, where it's either the school would organize something or mining companies are organizing events, to just show up, see what it's about, talk to people. That's pretty important, and just learn about people's different experiences. I've been in mining not that long, so 3 and a bit years, but even I, attending those kinds of events, I'm still learning about jobs that I didn't even know existed in mining. And sometimes it's not that you don't realize they exist. So I'll give you an example. I went to an event recently and met someone who worked in investor relations. And obviously I know we have investor relations, but to actually meet someone and have the ability and the opportunity to ask them about what that job really is and what they do and what kind of skills they use, I think that's one way you could understand what's out there. And as you share your interests as well, people typically know within their organizations in mining, where that skill or that technology, that interest that you have may fit. So they may be also able to guide you in terms of, hey, maybe you should look at these kinds of jobs. And if you're shy and you don't want to go network in a pool of people and ask different people about their different experiences, I've also realized that a lot of people who have been in mining for a long time have had, career journeys that just turned and took different twists and turns. And so even speaking to one person and asking them about their journey, I think you'll learn so much about the possibilities and the opportunities. Aside from speaking to people, I would also say that mining is an industry like any other who is disrupted by technology. And so the same technologies, and maybe I'm focused on technology here, but sustainability, all the mega trends that you see that other companies are, scrambling to figure out, mining is also a company that would have the same kind of challenges. And so, if you're thinking of a tech company, those same challenges likely exist in mining. And what I think, which is why I'm in mining right now, what I think is interesting about mining is that those challenges are complex. So if you like to solve hard problems, typically that same job that you would find, if I translate work I've done in AI in the financial services versus here, there's so much more layers of complexity that I find that personally very interesting. So think about, the interest that you have and how that may apply in other industries and question that. So what would that mean for mining? And if you really don't know and you can't figure it out, I think people are pretty open. So finding people within the mining sector to just discuss, maybe they're not the right person, but I'm sure they'd be happy to connect you to someone else who might know better, who might be able to guide you and answer your questions, I think is maybe the few tips that I have for you.
That's really good. And I think one thing I've learned about mining is people are willing to share. And I think it may not seem like it, but it seems to me a very approachable industry when you're asking people to tell them about their jobs. They're always willing to share.
Yeah, close-knit community.
Yeah. It's a big industry, but also a very small industry, right? And there's a lot of head nodding from some of the students, so I think they'll hopefully heed your advice. This whole conversation has been really fun, Suzanne, but we did want to actually have some more maybe pointed fun questions before we send you on your way.
Sure.
We noticed in some of our internet sleuthing on you that you do like to travel, but I think a boring podcast question would be like, where's your favorite place to go? So maybe we'll kind of reframe it as, one of the best ways to experience a new city or culture is through its food. So maybe if you could think back to some of the destinations you've been in terms of a culinary journey, what was one of your favorite places where you've really got to experience that location through some of the dishes you were able to enjoy while you were there?
Sure. Many. It's a hard pick to ask me for my favorite
Especially
anything.
Right before lunch, right? So.
Exactly. But I'd pick Morocco. And it's just, so three things maybe. Couscous is a dish you typically eat on Fridays. So to have the experience of, I'm not Muslim, so I don't go to mosque, but Fridays for them as a majority Muslim country is we go to the mosque and we have couscous. And so being able to kind of be part of that was pretty cool. They also have a pretty big tea culture. I love tea. I guess that's something you maybe didn't dig out. But
No, we didn't.
We also didn't serve tea as a result.
Oh,
what a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have a lot of green tea with mint and heavy on the sugar. But the idea there is that anytime you visit someone at their home, anywhere you go, they serve you tea, and that's a sign of hospitality. So to be able to experience that as well, but also see the connection with the tea trade, because again, I'm a tea person, but green tea typically comes from China, or back then did. And so to see the connection between Asia and North Africa and what that meant for the trade route and, spices and all of that was pretty cool. And a third maybe aspect just to share is around tagine. So I had the luck of learning how to make tagine. It's one of the traditional dishes. It's cooked in a pot. It's not, well, I guess a pot. I have no better word for it. That looks like a bit like a pyramid. And they also have a culture of pottery. And so to kind of, again, see that connection between the food and the pottery and how that all comes together, I just thought it was really wonderful.
That is a more in-depth answer than I would give. It'd be like pizza. No.
Because of the cheese.
Yeah, there's a really good
No,
cheese.
I've been with this guy in a restaurant in Montreal where he was almost moved to tears by the dessert he had. So I think you can get on that level.
That's true. That's fair enough. Mike wants, so we'll just go through a couple of these sort of fun ones. Manufacturing fun always works, I think.
I'm having a good time.
I'm having a great time. Mike wanted me to ask you, because he's a neophyte when it comes to DIY, what advice you have for people that are looking to do do-it-yourself projects but might not have the confidence to start?
I think confidence is tied to fear, so don't be afraid. For me, DIY is self-expression. You have something to say, we all have something to say, and that something is unique as, the number of people we have on this planet. And so don't be afraid to start, just get it started. One of the things, my master's was in design, I think you mentioned that. And one of the mistakes maybe people think about when they think design is, oh, you must be a great drawer and like an artist. I'm like, nah, that's a different kind of design. But what I did learn is when someone asked me, can you draw? I was like, nah, I can't draw. But if you think about drawing, someone once told me was, can you make a line? Can you make a dot? Can you make a squiggle? Can you make a line? And those are the basics of drawing. So if I make a stick figure, it's a person, right? So I conveyed my message and I was able to express myself. Now, that's the starting point. So if you're afraid, that's the starting point. You can do it. The next question is, are you trying to perfect that craft? I'm not an artist, so no, I don't. But, I guess the premise of all this answer is to say progress over perfection. You got to start somewhere. If I tie it to innovation, it's, you got to take that risk. You got to have a bit of faith in yourself, be courageous, I guess, and just try. What's the worst that's going to happen?
See, you'll have a deck by the end of the summer, I feel.
For the record, this is Steve's question, but
what?
Yeah, what I need is like a DIY sandbox where I can test those things out
Right.
before I unleash them inside the home, right? I think there's a lot of things I would like to express in my house that my wife would not want me to do that until she's seen that I'm capable of doing that. So
Have you tried telling her this is a matter of my self-expression and you're hampering me?
maybe that's the way to
Yeah.
go next time, right? If it's off kilter, it's like that's just
how
who
I
I
saw
am.
it.
This is
Yeah.
what you signed up for.
And I'm an artist because I can draw a line, a
Yeah.
dot, and a squiggle.
This might help me actually more than I think.
Yeah.
Even it is his question. I maintain it's his question, but I think
there's
the
no
answer
proof-
is
there's no proof of that.
will serve me well. So our last question for you, Suzanne: why would you jump out of a perfectly good airplane?
Because that would be the beginning of a good story. I mean, if I started my story telling you I jumped out of a perfectly good airplane, I'm sure you'd all be hooked. You want to know what's happening, so yeah, that's why.
Was it something you always wanted to do? For me, it's like something I always know that I don't want to do. It's intriguing to me because I watch a lot of shows where like people jump out of airplanes, and I
Yeah.
just think that looks cool, but I can't.
Are there a lot of shows where people are jumping out of airplanes?
Haven't seen any.
Well, maybe I just keep watching the same shows over and
Band
over.
of Brothers?
Band of Brothers, yeah.
I think it's the element of thrill, right? Of seeing what's out there. I know this is an innovation podcast, so I don't have to go there, but an analogy for that is if you're always kind of in your box and you never look at what's outside, what's the different perspective? What does life look like with less constraints? And so if I think of jumping out of an airplane, obviously figuratively, let's be clear, it's kind of that idea as well, right? The metaphor of you could be in the plane and see the same view and see the same seats, or you could jump out and actually realize, oh, I can see what's down. I could feel the air in my face. But yeah, that's maybe just me.
I think I would do it if I could do it in a sandbox, as we've been saying. I would in a very well-controlled.
Off a wall, maybe?
Yeah,
Like those
yeah,
little...
yeah. That's a good
Well,
idea.
I feel like they have those in Toronto where you can go into
Oh yeah,
one
with
of
the
those.
with the big fan.
With the air flowing
Yeah.
around
Yeah, yeah.
you. That's a good one.
We can start there and
I
work your
think
way up.
that's our next live podcast. I don't think anyone will hear us. It'll sound like a big fan's on for an hour. Anyway, I could do these all day, but we wanted to thank you, obviously, for joining us and sharing some of your really sort of rich experiences so far, and sort of how that intersects with what you're doing at Vale Base Metals, VBM, right now. I'm going to keep saying VBM, I think, forever. But
Sounds great.
I think what we want to do now is we have a mic set up in the audience, and oftentimes we don't get a chance to do this because we record podcasts and post them. But if there's anyone in the audience who'd like to ask Suzanne any questions, we'd like to do that now. But before we do that, just join me in thanking Suzanne for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And everyone is just rushing to the microphone. But if there's anyone who has a question, please go ahead and ask. Brandy.
Check. Yeah, perfect. Thank you for being here today. I think it's always really inspiring to see a woman working in such a leadership role in the sector. I know here at the college we spend a lot of time really focusing on trying to recruit young women into the sector, into technology careers. Would love to hear from you a little bit about what your experience has been like as a woman in the sector, any challenges, obstacles you've faced, if any, or just words of wisdom you'd like to share with girls considering those types of careers.
That's an interesting question. I think VBM is from my experience being here 3 years, has been pretty progressive. So we have Women and Allies ERG as an example. So that's like a safe environment, a safe community to expose some of the challenges you may face as a woman in your day-to-day work. Words of wisdom is, I think at the end of the day, your career shouldn't be limited by the industry being male-dominated. Easier said than done. I graduated from engineering, so not too many women there. But I do find that it's typically a very supportive environment. I've personally never experienced anything negative. I've always found support, so my leadership has been male for the most part. They've been very understanding. They've been very transparent. I feel like I'm able to do and perform at my best. And so maybe less, water advice, because I haven't encountered anything negative. It'd be great if you, are interested to find other women that you can connect with the industry. It's always nice to have that network, whether within the same company or even across different mining industries. There are also different groups. So Women in Mining, as an example, is one organization, and I do find that they typically have, events, so you can gather as a community, and it's always great to have allies as well. So just want to emphasize that. And you learn things, you learn tools, you're given resources. So maybe watching out for, those ERGs, those other kind of women-oriented organizations, but showing up as yourself and really, you're there for a reason. You're hired for your skill set, so you have something to offer, and not to be afraid that, you're less than or shouldn't say certain things just because of your gender.
Suzanne, I'd like to ask you, coming into the mining industry, what is one thing that surprised you about the sector, and maybe one thing that didn't surprise you about the sector?
Maybe the surprise goes back to the question you asked me. I thought it would be dull. So I was recruited into mining, which means I didn't necessarily go looking for mining. Mining came to me. And I'm the kind of person who jumps out of a plane. So I was like, let's see what that's about. And if I don't like it, I don't have to stick around. But hey, I'm still here. And so the thing that surprised me was just how advanced a lot of the work that was being done was, that I just, again, it's probably super inappropriate for me to say that, but I kind of still saw mining as, this dirty industry before coming in. So that to me was very enlightening to see, there's so much work done around environment. There's so much work done around AI. There's so much, and it was like, wow, I wonder why we don't hear about those things unless we're inside the industry or the company. So that's the one thing that surprised me. What didn't surprise me? I don't know. I feel like I came in with an open mind, and I'm always generally surprised by things. The one thing that didn't surprise me, I'll have to think about that. I feel like everything I kind of encountered was, oh, this is a beautiful, great surprise, but I didn't really have expectations. Maybe that's also why I was, came in blind. So yeah, I'll have to think on that one.
Well, and I should say that Suzanne can chat a little bit afterwards, so if there's anyone who's too shy of the big lights, you can come and ask her individually to start building that network. Any other questions from the audience? Awesome. Once again, thank us in having Suzanne here today.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.